and you're good to go.
Good morning. Welcome to the April 6th Paths Trails Subcommittee remote public hearing. The city encourages your interest and participation in the public hearing process. The Paths Trails Subcommittee is an advisory board to the Transportation Commission. The Paths Trails Subcommittee of the Transportation Commission is hereby established to advise the commission as a whole and to provide a public forum for issues surrounding paths and trails. Until further notice, Paths Trails Subcommittee meetings are being held electronically, while physical facilities are not open to the public. Paths Trails Subcommittee meetings are available on Scottsdale's YouTube channel to allow the public to virtually attend and view the meeting in progress. Citizens wishing to comment or speak on any agenda item must have submitted public comments or a request to speak form no later than 90 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Citizen comments will not otherwise be taken during the meeting, but the public is encouraged to submit written comments after the meeting on any matters that happen during this meeting. Citizens that have already submitted a request to speak form are allotted 3 minutes to speak when called upon during the public comment period of the action item. Please mute your devices while you are live in the meeting and speaking to help eliminate audio feedback. Begin by stating your name and your address for the record and then proceed with your comment. Those remotely attending this meeting shall observe the same rules of order and decorum as if they were physically in attendance at City Hall. Thank you for your interest and time. We'll begin the meeting with a roll call vote. Can we have a roll call vote? Hello?
I didn't click on mute right. Sorry about that. Chair Anderson?
Here.
Thank you. Subcommittee Member Davis?
Here.
Subcommittee Member Law?
Here.
Thank you. Subcommittee Member Levy?
Here.
Great. Thank you. I'll
Okay.
put the agenda up next.
Any public comments, Susan? Do we have any public comments?
We do not.
Okay. Move on to item number 1 of the agenda, approval of meeting minutes from February 2nd. Does anybody on the committee have any comments or changes they'd like to put on the meeting minutes?
Chair Anderson, this is Subcommittee Member Davis. I had one correction. Page 5, Section 6, Old Town Bicycle Master Plan, 4th sentence down. It calls out work urban design. I believe it's spelled W-E-R-K.
That is correct. Thank you for catching that.
And that was the only correction I found.
Okay.
Any other comments or corrections for anybody? If not, excuse me, if not, I will entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes as corrected.
This is Ted Levy, so moved.
And I will second that.
That's Davis for the second and Levy for the motion. Thank you. And then I'll do a roll call to approve. Chair Anderson?
Yes.
Thank you. Subcommittee Member Davis?
Yes.
Subcommittee Member Lal?
Aye.
Thank you. Subcommittee Member Levy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, unanimous approval, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Transportation Action Plan, item number 2 on the consent agenda. David Meinhardt.
Good morning, members of the subcommittee, Commissioner or Chair Davis, Anderson. I'm a little out of it this morning too. Let me get into my slideshow here. And today I'm going to be talking about the initiation of our Transportation Action Plan, which is going to be the replacement for our current transportation master plan, which was last adopted by Transportation Commission and City Council in 2016. Now, this presentation will look quite familiar to the chair and subcommittee member Lal, since it's pretty much a portion of what was presented to the Transportation Commission last month, but we did want to make sure that the subcommittee also has a chance to see where staff is heading in the early development of this plan, and look forward to any feedback you might have. Today, I'm going to be focusing on some of our early concepts in three of our elements: the streets element, bicycle element, and trails element. Streets element is included for this subcommittee because the bylaws for the subcommittee do include input on things such as bicycle lanes, and some of the ideas that we have on the street side could have very positive changes for our bike lane system in the future. So we'll jump into the streets element first. The biggest change or group of changes that we are looking at for the Transportation Action Plan relate to the classification of our roadways. Roadways can be classified as major arterials, minor arterials, major collectors, minor collectors, and then the rest primarily local streets. A major arterial is a roadway that is planned, either has or is planned to have 6 travel lanes on it. A minor arterial would be 4 lanes. We are in this early stage looking at one existing major arterial segment and considering switching that to a minor arterial, and that's Hayden Road on the southern end of town from McKellips, which is at the Tempe border, up to Indian School Road. We are also looking at a very unique street classification we have called the couplet, which is here in the downtown area near our city offices. And that's a combination of Drinkwater Boulevard on the east side of Scottsdale Road and Goldwater Boulevard on the west side of Scottsdale Road, and looking at the potential of changing the classification of those 2 streets to minor arterials, which would mean in the future, we would look at a 4-lane cross section rather than the current, which is a 5-lane cross section. In the area of minor arterials, which again are currently 4 lanes, typically with a raised center median, to a minor collector, which would be dropping down to 2 travel lanes, and a minor collector sometimes has a center median. In most cases, it has a center 2-way turn lane. If we were to do some of these conversions, we would most likely not be looking at eliminating the raised medians if they currently existed. But we have 2 locations we're considering at this early stage. One is just north of Carefree Highway on the Scottsdale Road corridor, where it becomes Tom Darlington Drive going up to the Carefree town border. And this is one that we would be coordinating with town of Carefree on as to whether we can make that change. But it is a segment which we receive a lot of requests for bike lane improvements. It was going to be done 2 ways, one through roadway widening, the other would be through travel lane reduction. And that's one of the considerations we'll be looking at going forward. Another roadway up north that's currently designated minor arterial is Westland Drive from Scottsdale Road over to the Hayden Road alignment. And we are looking at changing that classification to minor collector as well. And as I'm going through all of these segments that we're looking at for potential change, it's because of the combination of historic travel use and also looking at projected travel use as well. We have 10 different segments that we're looking at the possibility of converting from major collectors to minor collectors, again, going from 4 travel lanes to 2 travel lanes. We got 92nd Street from Raintree to Frank Lloyd Wright, 96th Street from Via Linda to Shea, 100th Street, Frank Lloyd Wright to Frank Lloyd Wright's part of a loop system up near Horizon Park. The 130th, 132nd Street alignment from Shea Boulevard up to Via Linda, which is on the west side of the Mayo Clinic facilities. Legend Trail Parkway up north from Pima to Stagecoach Pass. McCormick Parkway from Scottsdale Road to Hayden. Osborne Road, 68th to Scottsdale. Raintree Drive from Thompson Peak to Frank Lloyd Wright. Redfield Road from Raintree to Frank Lloyd Wright, and Thunderbird Road, 89th to Frank Lloyd Wright. It's quite a few locations, and we'll be mapping those out in the future for additional public input. But the key is we're looking at these things such as travel demand trends and forecasts. There are opportunities to significantly improve our on-street bike lane system, which has a secondary effect of improving pedestrian comfort in the corridors, because we have the potential of shifting the roadway traffic further away from the sidewalks along these streets. This graph is an example of the Hayden Road segment I mentioned earlier, from down in the southern part of town, from Tempe border up to Indian School. And this graph actually goes a little farther north up to Camelback. What I'm showing are the travel volumes that the city counted through our tube count program. We typically count all these segments on an every other year basis, and then we track those over time, and then also look at collision data as well to help us identify needs, both from a safety perspective as well as a capacity management perspective. And on the left side of this graph, very left side, is the type of volumes we had on Hayden Road before the Loop 101 freeway was opened. And you can see in some cases, those volumes were amazingly high for a 6-lane roadway, over 70,000 cars a day in the Indian School Road vicinity. For those of you who've been here quite a while, as I have, you might remember how challenging it could be to move along the Hayden Road corridor prior to the freeway opening. And same for Scottsdale Road. Once the freeway opened in the southern end of town around the 2000 timeline, it was late 90s, we saw this dramatic drop in volumes, which continued to drop even further in 2002 as more of the freeway corridor opened to the north. By 2002, we had connectivity on the freeway pretty much through all of Scottsdale. And then once the freeway was fully opened and operating and people's travel patterns began to change, in some cases business location patterns change as well, you see that travel has been basically flat as far as, there's been a few ups and downs, but the trend is very flat in a capacity range that a 4-lane roadway can handle quite smoothly. We also looked at the 2040 forecast from Maricopa Association of Governments out at the very far right of the graph. And again, the long range forecast is not suggesting any significant changes in this area. And even you might see like the orange line at the bottom for up at the McDowell Road corridor, that actually shows some drop, and that's most likely related to the concept of Pima Road continuing south of McDowell in the future across Salt River, Pima, Maricopa Indian Community lands and connecting down to Hayden Road around the Curry Road alignment. Now we look at some of the opportunities that can be created by this idea of reclassifying roadways to a more suitable level for what the actual demand is in an area that has the Pima Freeway on the west, roughly Thunderbird Road on the south, and then 100th Street and Frank Lloyd Wright on the east. In this triangle area that we tend to refer to as the Horizon community, based on Horizon Park up at the north end, all of these streets that are in yellow are currently built with 4 travel lanes. And based on what we see from not only long-term travel trends as well as forecasts, there is the opportunity that all of these yellow segments could be converted to 2-lane roadways. That could be through a simple change in the striping that is out there when the roadways are resurfaced, and it could go all the way to a much more extensive modification, which would be what we'd call a right sizing of a roadway, where you'd actually would be moving curbs so that you'd have less asphalt to maintain in the future. And here's an on-ground example of what can be done if you go to that larger extent and obviously more expensive extent of right sizing a street. This is 96th Street in the Sweetwater Ranch community. On the left is what that street looked like when it was initially built by the development, what we call a major collector roadway with 4 travel lanes and a center turn lane. So at that point, it was roughly 60 feet of asphalt curb to curb. What the city did with some funds that were available for the 96th Street corridor from the Bond 2000 program was to go through a public outreach process and then recommend a conversion of 96th Street to a minor collector, in this case with 1 lane each direction. And we did go with the landscape median in many locations, on-street bike lanes. And then we also were able to create an extension of the Indian Bend Wash Path corridor over on the left side of the photo and the west side of the street. A less dramatic change that can be done through a roadway paint diet, as I like to refer to it, when you convert a major collector to a minor collector, was recently accomplished on 124th Street, north of Via Linda, going up towards the Lost Dog Wash trailhead. Here we had gone to the commission and the city council last fall as part of a package of more immediate changes to our street classifications, because we had a paving program getting ready to get underway, and we had some opportunities. So we were hoping to take advantage of 124th Street north of Via Linda being one of those. And again, we had previously a 5-lane roadway with bike lanes and a center turn lane. And we converted that into a 2-lane roadway with center turn lane and what we refer to as buffered bike lanes. And when you have a lot of pavement and you change from a major collector to a minor collector, you can end up with pretty wide buffers, which does provide significant separation from between the vehicles and bikes, as well as pedestrians on the sidewalk. Another form of opportunity that we've been pursuing over the last several years and want to codify in the Transportation Action Plan is adding a second typical cross section for streets that remain minor collectors or in some cases are converted to minor collectors. On the left, we have a minor collector with center turn lane and fairly narrow bike lanes. And when that roadway was resurfaced, in this case, this was 110th Street, just north of Choya, and curving around, it becomes Alameda at Frank Lloyd Wright. And here we took the existing concept and converted it into a minor collector cross section with no center turn lane. And this is something that can be done on roads that typically are only carrying a few thousand cars a day or less. There's not a large demand for left turn movements to the point where you would have one left turn blocking through traffic. So we have started to look at those examples, and I included an attachment in your packet that lists a significant number of segments of roadway where we could consider this concept, and it could add up to 50 additional lane miles of buffered bike lanes in our community by moving forward with this addition of a second cross section. Now, moving on to the bicycle element, some of the early concepts here, we really want to focus a lot of effort on completing our priority paths, and in some cases renovating our priority paths. We've discussed some initial concepts for renovations of Indian Bend Wash Path with subcommittee previously, and right now we are, I think it was reported at the last meeting, we are expecting to have council approve a new CIP that would include that first phase of renovations on Indian Bend Wash Path. But our priority paths, Indian Bend Wash, going the full length of our community from the Tempe border all the way up to the Carefree border at Stagecoach Pass Road. The Crosscut Canal Path, which is a short stretch going south to Tempe, tying into the Arizona Canal at near 64th Street in McDowell, and then the Arizona Canal heading up into our downtown area and past, and then connecting easterly over to the Pima Road corridor, where we do have an additional pathway that's a combination of multi-use path and bike route that runs from again, our southern border, basically down off of Roosevelt Street on the south up to Shea Boulevard on the north. And then the Central Arizona Project Canal. The good news with the Arizona Canal path is that, with the exception of one very short segment just north of Camelback Road, that path is completely paved. Crosscut Canal path is completely paved and finished, and is all at 10-foot minimum width, which is our standard. There's one piece of I mentioned Arizona Canal just north of Camelback. We are getting ready next week to put in a temporary improvement, which would allow for 6 feet of paving on the canal bank that at least allows some hardened surface on the top of the canal bank while we work through significant design and funding challenges to build a full 10-foot wide path in that short segment that's missing. Unfortunately, between SRP, canal bank issues, large flood control district storm drains, and the slope on the canal bank, and an existing floodplain as well, there isn't an easy solution. And we're hoping to be able to partner with future development along that last remaining portion of the canal bank in the future to get a permanent solution. Indian Bend Wash, we have done a lot of work from the southern boundary up to Westworld. Again, we do have continuous pavement that whole way. As we've mentioned in previous meetings, much of it is narrow 8-foot pavement that was constructed 40 years or more ago, and we do want to widen that out and also obviously replace it and work on improving some of the issues we have in those paths segments with irrigation, water, cross slopes, and other things. And then moving northward, we'll be connecting from the Westworld area where my cursor is over to the Pima Road corridor, where as we do roadway improvements and work with private developments, we'll be continuing to extend that pathway all the way north up to the town of Carefree boundary. When it comes to secondary paths, we'll be focusing a lot of work, especially in the north part of town, on what we would consider to be side paths, which are pathways 8 to 10 feet wide that would be in proximity to primary roadway corridors. Those corridors, an example would be Dynamite Boulevard is one, Scottsdale Road is another, where as we do roadway improvements there, we're also, much like Pima Road, looking to add a path on one side or the other, depending on the location we're at and the right-of-way available. And we'll continue that process as we go forward. We have a project in design right now on Happy Valley Road, which is in this area here, where not only will we be putting on-street bike lanes on the north side of the road there, we'll have an 8-foot wide shared use path to provide connectivity between Pima Road and Alma School Road. I mentioned earlier how we've tried to coordinate changes in striping with pavement improvements, and which was part of what we did last fall. And I showed you the 124th Street example north of Via Linda. We have spent time over the last several years identifying opportunities for improvements to the on-street bike system throughout the city so that we can be ready to go with those ideas when a pavement treatment is scheduled. And this is just a map showing some of the different examples of the types of improvements we can make in these corridors. Some cases, it's tightening up the travel lanes when they were built previously to 12 feet wide, and our current standard now is 11 feet. So that gives us some opportunities. In some cases, I mentioned it could be eliminating a center turn lane and putting in buffered bike lanes. And there's some cases where it doesn't look like we really have much opportunity. The ones I show in red here, where the best we may be able to do is to just get a wider outside lane than we currently have, where you might have two 12-foot lanes right now, and you'd go to an 11 and a 13. To mark it as a bike lane, the narrowest we can go is 3.5 feet next to a curb and gutter situation, or 3 feet next to a rolled curb. But obviously we try to get 4 feet minimum, and 5 is our standard today. This is just another example of what it looks like for our thought process on future restriping. Up here in the top of the map in the blue, that's that same area that I was showing the subcommittee earlier with all the bright yellow lines where we have a lot of opportunity because roads were built expecting much more travel demand than has come to fruition over the last couple of decades. And a lot of that was due to the fact that when the planning was done for those roads, we had a couple of different thoughts. One was there'd be a lot more employment in this area here, whereas the significant employment center has been over on the west side of the freeway in the air park. And then, of course, a lot of the roads that we're looking at, the cross sections and classifications were originally identified before the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve was even a concept, much less something that is virtually complete. And that as well has had a positive impact from the standpoint of giving us options to improve the on-street bike system. Trails element, some of our early thoughts here are key focus areas, completing connections to the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve. There's been a lot of progress made on that to date, and we want to try to focus on completing all the remaining connections to the preserve. And then an area that we expect to see a lot of focus in is filling in gaps in the neighborhood trail system. Here in the middle of this map, you'll see some purple lines and then a bunch of dashed lines. The purple lines are locations where trails that have been installed. In some cases, as Susan will be discussing in the next presentation, they may not always have been maintained as well as we had hoped, but we're working on that issue as well. But then trying to infill a lot of those dashed lines over the next 5 to 10 years. In many cases, the trails in this part of town are also the only pedestrian access that's available because of the rural nature of the corridors. The sidewalks were never built or intended. And with that, I've spoken quite a bit. I appreciate your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions, go back to any slides that you'd like me to highlight a little bit more. And thank you.
I see, thank you, David, for your presentation. It was very, very good. I have a question from Committee Member Davis.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. My question was, so I've kind of looked at the history of the transportation master plans, right? The original was in 2008, and then we had, I don't know if it's considered an update or an amendment in 2016. So how does the package that we're putting together now, it doesn't replace the existing documents, does it? Is it just considered a refresh? Because I know that at least in the 2008 document, it's quite quite lengthy in terms of the amount of detail that's in there. So can you maybe explain how these documents or this specific transportation action plan works with the existing material?
Subcommittee Member Davis, members of the subcommittee, very good question. And the evolution of the plan of our master plans, again, prior to 2008, we basically were relying on the circulation element of the general plan, as well as some design standards and policies that had been developed. 2008 plan, is mentioned, is very detailed, and a lot of what went into developing that plan, I'm quite familiar with it. It was the group I was managing at the time who coordinated that effort, was to document a lot of the thought process and how we do master planning as opposed to a plan itself. So there is a lot of background information in there that's really now would be considered more historical in nature. That wasn't necessarily things that were needed for the plan to move forward, but to help provide that detailed explanation of the thought process that went into developing the plan. The 2016 plan, which was approved when I was in retirement, was a replacement for the 2008 plan, but there were references made that they still went back to the 2008 plan. the 2000 or the Transportation Action Plan is intended to be a replacement for the previous documents. The reasoning is that we're to a point in the development of our community that we believe that we've got a really good sense of what our network should be, and that in many cases where it was built to an extent larger than it needed to be. So we are certainly looking at this action plan as the document to work from moving forward in time. Obviously, it will get updated in 5 years or so as well, but we aren't looking to continue to reference back to the older documents. We do have a lot of work that goes into the city's design standards and policies manual, which also goes through a public approval process through the design review board and every few years. So there's not, in my mind, there's not a need to continue to revisit or refer back to those older documents. I mean, 13 years ago now for 2008 plan, but it served us well. But I truly believe we're at a point where we can be focused more on the action to kind of focus on completing, stumbling over that word, our network, as opposed to kind of having looking at what we're going to need in 20 or 30 or 40 years. We're much more focused on the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one follow-up question. So I know that we're going to highlight the 3 high priority paths in the city. Will we still be including an appendix that calls out, the secondary path system which you referenced, and plans for that?
Yes, Subcommittee Member Davis, we will be doing that. We have there's a map of existing plan paths in the 2016 plan, as there was in the 2008 plan. We will continue that into the action plan as well. So yeah, we're not going to ignore the other systems. We just want to, from the standpoint of where we would prioritize our expenditures for improvements in the near term, we'll look to focus on completing the primary corridors.
Understood. Thank you.
This is Chair Anderson. Any other questions from the committee members? I don't see any hands. Subcommittee Member Davis, you still have a question, or you need to lower your hand?
Just needed to lower my hand. Thank you.
Okay, gotcha. David, I have one quick question myself. Excuse me, I've got allergies these days. Back at the beginning, you made a mention about converting couplets, specifically Drinkwater and Goldwater, from a couplet to a minor arterial, where you're going from 5 lanes to 4 lanes. Does that mean you're eliminating the center left turn lane, or is there presently now 3 through one way and 2 through the other way?
Yeah, Chair Anderson, yes, the couplet as it exists today, Drinkwater Boulevard has 3 northbound lanes and 2 southbound lanes, and Goldwater has 3 southbound lanes and 2 northbound lanes with no on-street bike lanes, and sometimes gaps in pedestrian connectivity. Other places, narrow sidewalks adjacent to curb or near or fairly close to curbs. So in this case, you would still have the same turn lane capacity at intersections, but between those intersections, we'd look at having opportunities to make adjustments in the cross section. Now, a first phase of improvements on that couplet, if we do change the classification, may just be a paint solution that would allow at least a northbound bike lane on Drinkwater Boulevard and a southbound bike lane on Goldwater Boulevard. But for the couplets, if we did change it to a minor arterial, the long-term objective would be to modify the curb and median locations as necessary to be able to construct what would be a classic 4-lane minor arterial complete street with bike lanes on both sides, combination of raised medians and turn bays, and sidewalks are typically a minimum of 8 feet wide and typically separated from back of curb. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I have a question from Subcommittee Member Livy.
Hi, yes, this is Ted Levy, and I'll apologize in advance. I wasn't sure if this this was something I was thinking about before the meeting and was thinking it might fall into the topics for future discussion, but it looks like it might be relevant here. So I'll withdraw it now for now if you tell me that that this is outside the scope of this. But one of the things, as I look at this plan, especially around the priority and secondary paths, and I know you mentioned something about doing some widening and improvements on some parts of the Indian Bin Wash path, commonly called the Greenbelt path, that's 40 years old and 8 feet wide. But I've spent over the past year a lot more time on that Greenbelt than I even had previously, and one of the things I've really observed has been a great increase in both in usage, but also in usage by vehicles that weren't there 2 or 3 years ago. E-bikes, e-scooters, these 3-wheel scooter things you can sit on, these dual-wheel fat tire things that aren't bikes because there's no pedals, but I wouldn't quite call them a motorcycle. Just all sorts of this, and it occurs to me at some point there's going to need to be a discussion about re-engineering that and all this is on a 8 or 10 foot path that's got a lot of pedestrian traffic, strollers, things like that. There's going to need to be a discussion about the engineering of that path. Should it be much wider? Should there be 2 paths going down through the Greenbelt? And I know those are huge. These would be huge projects that would be years and years long. But I do feel like there needs to start being some planning around that. And that's more than just, again, like widening a path from 8 to 10 feet or improving the concrete. Is that something that would fall into, or that kind of long range planning, something that would fall into this kind of a plan? Or is that something that would be re-engineering a path, the Indian Bin Wash path? Would that be outside would that be a whole separate effort in terms of planning and engineering and design and all that?
Subcommittee member Levy, Chair Anderson, there are kind of 2 parts to your question. The first has to do with, I think, that what types of vehicles are using the path, and Susan Conclu has been leading a team that's working on updates to ordinances related to the use of electric scooters, bikes, and the like. But at this point, that would be going. I think that's been reviewed with this committee or subcommittee in the past, and there's still more work being done. We have a new council who's also looking at this, and we'll be going back to council at some point, probably later this year. So there's the issue of the types of vehicles that can be used, and in most cases, we are expecting that these electrified vehicles, as long as they're the ones that are 20 miles an hour or less, could still be used on the corridor. Yeah, the width issue or the idea of a separate paths, we certainly would be looking at where there's high levels of use. Our recommendations would be trying to fit in a 12-foot path rather than the 8 or a 10-foot. In many cases, it could be very difficult to build 2 paths because just the way that the land is laid out and the dedications are made, there may not be space to do 2 separate ones. But we'll certainly be looking at the potential usage as part of this planning effort and try to understand where we may need to provide something additional. I can speak just from anecdotally to a path system that was installed along the lakefront in Chicago several years ago, and it's become so popular that they've actually created a separate path, one path for bikes or other wheeled vehicles, and a separate one for pedestrians. But there, the city owns a whole lot more, or controls a lot more land next to the lakefront than we tend to have in many of our quarters where it's the busiest. But certainly, the level of demand we expect is something that we will factor into recommendations in the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I don't see any other hands. Anybody else on the committee would like to have any questions? That being said, I think we'll move on now to item number 3, trail maintenance outreach. Susan?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Let me get my presentation pulled up. Oops. On trail maintenance outreach. So this is an item that we're returning back to you. Let me know once I have this up. Can you see my cover slide? Anybody?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is a returning item following up now that we've gone farther into this trail maintenance outreach plan. But just in case anyone has missed the background from before, we have about 150 miles of existing unpaved trails outside the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve and 189 miles that are planned. Typically, these are within city right-of-way or on easements on private property. A lot of times that's with individual property owners, but there are also a lot of situations where it's common tracts for homeowners associations. And in 2020, there was a citizen that requested the city improve communication with property owners about trail maintenance and responsibilities. So reminder about maintenance responsibility. This is a lot like sidewalks, but I think because trails look so natural, it may be harder for people to equate the two. But the city code does require the owner of a adjacent property to that right-of-way to do routine property maintenance to keep everything orderly and safe. That also means that they would maintain their own property so that it does not interfere with public use of the right-of-way. The best example I have of that would be like if the person has a tree growing on their property, but the branch hangs out into the right-of-way and it could interfere in that way. Citizens and city staff may report issues through Scottsdale EZ. I always recommend that. That's the best way to report any kinds of issues, and it works. That helps us maintain our records as well versus reporting it some other way. The Design Standards and Policies Manual has information about what type of maintenance is needed. It talks about the distance, clear space above a trail for vegetation, as well as distance off of the trail, what the maximum height can be, as well as what types of plants can be there. That we do not like spiny or thorny plants within, I think, 2 feet of a trail. And that's on the city's website. So the communication plan that staff drafted, it would involve local media, social media posts, the different city communication methods, such as the news feed, Scottsdale update, which is emailed regularly to people who subscribe, a utility bill insert, the Scottsdale Video Network, as well as our Paths and Trails webpage, targeted mailing if feasible, and then coordination with citizen services staff. They've got the Operation Fix It and another program. So the update is that we did give an overview on December 8th to the group. And since then, our staff have created a schedule for implementing this communication plan with near-term and long-term approaches. And our staff also met with staff from Citizen Services to discuss their ongoing programs and any possibilities for partnering with something that could involve volunteers that do their own neighborhood cleanup or other ideas, as well as the Scottsdale Video Network staff that walked us through what the process would be for creating a video. So our next steps, this month, we would tentatively draft and finalize a script for the video, produce this video, and then staff will be preparing the project, the webpage text and content, and that would be published in early June tentatively. And then this will be, once those are all in place, the plan will be publicized with a web article on the news page for Scottsdale, some social media posts the utility insert, and then announcements in Scottsdale update. And everything would point back to the web page where that video is, so that we can always update and put more information there for the public to come back and refer to. And then this would also include, as we move forward, any targeted outreach as needed. So the typical process is that code enforcement, when something, when there's an issue, they receive a report about that, and then they contact the property owner directly. But there are times where sometimes a neighborhood area receives letters ahead of any kind of violation, which is more of a reminder. We're looking into whether we would be doing something like that, reaching out to maybe a small group in an area where there are several trails with issues, or contacting an HOA if the trail is on their property. So we're still looking at that possibility. And if you have questions or would like to go back to any slides, please let me know.
Thank you, Susan. This is Chair Anderson. Is there any questions from the committee members at all for Susan? I don't see any hands. Susan, I have a quick question.
Thank you.
When there's a complaint or a concern voiced by someone and the city contacts that person, the responsible party, is the initial contact done by mail or in person?
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the subcommittee. So are you asking specifically when it's like a code violation and code enforcement reaches out?
Yes.
I believe they contact them with a letter in the mail. And then once they've established contact, they will either sometimes correspond over the phone or in person at the property. But I don't believe the initial contact is made in person, but I can verify that.
Because sometimes people don't understand what it's all about. And I know sometimes getting a letter in the mail, sometimes it's thrown in the trash or ignored or whatever, when a lot of times a personal outreach is quite helpful a lot of times. So I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you. I can find out and let you know.
Still don't see any questions for Susan from anybody on the committee? Doesn't look like it. If that's the case, we can move on to item number 4, which is other transportation projects and program status. Susan?
Thank you. Pull this one up. And I'm going to let Greg Davies is here for some of these slides, but once I get this pulled up, can you see the cover slide?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Oh, you can speak on yours?
Yeah, this is Greg Davies, Senior Transportation Planner. Good morning, Chair Anderson, members of the subcommittee. We're just going to go over some brief project updates, and this one is the Hayden Trail rebuild. This is really a prototype project that we embarked upon to really reconstruct a trail, which was Hayden Trail from Dynamite to Viadana. We had a request from the neighborhood to improve the trail, and so that's what we did. Before, you can see photos that it existed, but was kind of hard to see and to navigate through it. And you can see the after photos that provide much more access as well as more clearance in the vegetation. We've gotten comments from the neighborhood and they were pleased to have this trail rebuilt. And we have re-signed the trail with new signs, as well as some new signs on the Viadana Trail. So this trail was a success, and we plan on embarking upon this type of process in the near future. The second set of trails that I'm going to discuss are brand new trails. And we presented these to you in an earlier meeting or a previous meeting, and it's the Pinnacle Vista Trail and the Ranch Gate Trail. These are in northern Scottsdale. The Pinnacle Vista Trail goes from 62nd Street to 56th Street. And the Ranch Gate Trail goes from the about 128th Street alignment to, the 119th Street alignment to the 128th Street alignment. So I'm just showing you a broad map of the locations of these trails. Now we can move into actually what they look like today. These trails were just finished last Friday. This is the Pinnacle Vista Trail, which, as I said, is a new build. This trail is on the northern side of Pinnacle Vista Drive from 62nd Street to 56th Street. We got a lot of kudos from the neighborhood. There were people out there. Actually, the president of the HOA in which it's adjacent to came out and told my contractor that they were pleased to see this trail go in to provide better access to not only the school at 56th Street and Pinnacle Vista Drive, but also to the adjacent trails that exist already in the neighborhood. And as I had mentioned with the Hayden Trail, these trails are signed too, as you can see in the photos. This trail is about 6 foot wide trail, a natural native surface. It's really conducive. It's almost like an instant quarter minus trail that once you build it, it's there, and they will come, which they already have. And this is the Ranchgate Trail. This trail is a little bit more, it's interesting because it's right next to the roadway. As you can see that roll curve, we didn't have a lot of room because of the constraints with the right of way. Some of the trail already existed. And so I had the contractor go in and essentially reestablish the trail tread to allow people to use that, because before people were actually walking in the roadway, and that's Ranchgate. That road is very busy right now because of construction and a lot of housing development going on in the vicinity, but it's a very long stretch of road, and people sometimes tend to speed down there. And where they're going is the Tom's Thumb trailhead. That's exactly where they're going. And so this allows people within the neighborhood to actually walk all the way from eventually 118th Street all the way to Tom's Thumb. They're building a trail along 128th Street as we speak, and they're improving that roadway to include a path on the east side of 128th Street and then a trail on the west side. And so there will be a lot of ability to navigate down 128th Street via Ranchgate. So that these were successful. These trails were fairly cheap to build. The total cost for both these trails that we just built was about $22,000. And this project is an exciting project. This is the McDowell Road bike lanes. This project has been on the books for a while, and it is a federally funded project at 94.3%. to be exact, funded through federal funds of congestion mitigation, air quality funds. But this project is exciting because it's going to provide bike lanes on McDowell Road all the way from 64th to Pima. There are already some existing bike lanes on McDowell Road, but this will complete the entire corridor and make it congruent through the whole area. As we know, the McDowell Road corridor is revitalizing. There is a lot of people moving in the corridor. We have projects like Papago Plaza, Sky Song that are burgeoning and beginning to build out. Lots of residents are in the area and utilizing the actual wider sidewalks and path network that exists, and especially connectivity to the Indian Bend Wash corridor, our green belt, which is the jewel of the city. But this project is going to go to council today. It's a construction bid of $3.7 million. We will hopefully start construction, I would say maybe early June, maybe quicker, but it is finally come to fruition. And this project, like I said, will install bike lanes. We will do all the installation within the curb lines. We're not moving any curbs. We are not taking away any lanes, but we are going to reduce the lane width as well as reduce the medians that are in the corridor to allow about a 5-foot bike lane all the way through the corridor.
All right. 86th Street recently received new bike lanes from McDonald to Chaparral. This project was partly in response to some neighbor concerns about excessive speeds along the road. So you can see in this photo, the new surface, the new striping. And another thing to note is that this does give some extra space for pedestrians that are on the sidewalk between them and vehicles. So this has helped provide for all modes. Path wayfinding signage. This is another project long awaited. The design was completed for this several years ago, and now this is a CIP project that is active. So we are awaiting moving into take this to development review board. But this is just some of the graphics of what types of signs this will include. It'll include a signage of where you are in the system, directional signage as well, path identification signage, like showing you that you're on the Indian Bend Wash Path, as well as underpass and bridge signage to let people know what that cross street is. And the project area for this is, the design was done between McKellips and Indian Bend Road, but the installation that we will be putting into place will be from Thomas to Indian Bend Road, primarily on Indian Bend Wash Path. From Thomas down to McKellips, that will be implemented later when the Indian Bend Wash Master Plan is implemented with the parks there. Path counters. This is a project we're very excited about to just look at data out there. But this is a picture of the recently installed one that's at McKellips Park. So this is, you can't maybe see it very well in the photo, but there's little saw cuts with inductive loops put into the concrete right there. And then there's a post, looks like a bollard, but that has the counter equipment in it. It does differentiate path between bicyclists and pedestrians, and it also gives the direction of travel. We have 6 new ones that were installed recently, and 2 more will be installed. And then prior to that, the city had a new one a couple of years ago that was on the Crosscut Canal Bridge and Path project south of McDowell. So we learned a lot from that initial one, and that helped us determine where this next round would go. And we'll be bringing you a full item for this in June. So we'll give you more detail about all the locations and the data and what we're evaluating from there. April is Bike Month. Normally the city has, and other cities have, a lot of community events during April for Bike Month. We do Cycle the Arts every year and Bike to Work Day. Due to COVID-19, a lot of cities are still not going to be holding in-person events, but if you go to sharetheride.com, which is Valley Metro's site, they have the different cities' events pulled up there. There's a few virtual rides. We're preparing a virtual Cycle the Arts ride that people can go on their own and have the map. And there's an app enabled at the artwork, where if you use the app, it shows enhanced things when you're looking through, looking at your screen to take photos or videos of the artwork. And there'll be a Bike to Work week this year, starting on the 19th. Again, it won't have in-person events or anything like that, but if people log their trips at sharetheride.com, they're eligible to win prizes from Valley Metro. And then if people email me, sconclu@scottsdaleaz.gov. It'll be on our promotions with that link. But if people email a photo of themselves doing one of these events, they're eligible to win some prizes from the city as well. And we hope to get everything back to normal next year for April Bike Month. And that's what I have for project updates, unless anyone has questions.
Thank you, Susan. We have a question from Subcommittee Manager Davis, please.
Hi, Susan. Could you give us an update on, there was a project, I think it was like $1.5 million maybe of money that was raining in a bucket to improve Old Town sidewalks. We were going to use a portion of it to pave the AZ Canal, which I know is that last 700-foot section, which I know is now going to be asphalt, but we're also going to be doing some work on the sidewalks on Camelback on the north side to help piece together some of the gaps. Could you update us as to where we are with that effort?
I think we're allowed to do that during this item, but I'll ask Dave. I think he may know the timing better on both of those projects that are, I think, completed with design and or nearing design completion and moving toward installation, but I don't have the schedule with me. So I could find out, or we could have more information at the next meeting if I don't reach out to you before then. Dave?
Chair Anderson, members of subcommittee. I'd mentioned it in my presentation, our temporary solution for the Arizona Canal, that's going to construction next week.
Oh, that's even better. Thanks.
That's a 1 week construction timeline. We are still working through the final design and right-of-way acquisition issues. There's easements and other things that need to happen with the sidewalk on the north side of Camelback from approximately 73rd Street over to Miller Road. But the design is almost 100%. We are also working with APS on undergrounding either 3 or 4 poles that will help to make the corridor not only look better, but to provide a little bit more space to work with. Our goal there still is to get that under construction this summer. And a lot of that's going to tie into the utility timing and whatnot, but we're very close to moving that one forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody on the committee? Yeah. If that's the case, move on to item number 5, which is subcommittee identification of future agenda items. Is there any items that the committee members would like to see on future agenda items that we should bring up?
Yes, this is Subcommittee Member Davis. I would be interested on a short presentation regarding bike lane marking and our current thoughts on utilizing the green marking system that Phoenix and Tempe uses. I imagine since we're doing the update to the Transportation Action Plan, perhaps design criteria might be something we would include.
Thank you. I'm sorry, could you please repeat what you were asking? I was trying to find our right screen to share.
Of course. Where we're at in terms of saying yay or nay about incorporating the green bike lane markings style that Tempe and Phoenix use.
Okay, bike lane markings. So we can add that as a future item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other items from the committee members? Anybody like to have the staff present some issues? I see no more hands. If that's the case, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
This is Subcommittee Member Davis. So moved.
Do we have a second?
This is Ted Levy, second.
We'll call for the vote. Do we need a roll call?
I don't think we need to do the roll call. I think you just have to.
Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time, and we finished quickly.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for making it move smoothly. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.